On behalf of Atlassian, Aerial Partners, Octo Consulting, and Carasoft, I would like to welcome you to our session, Transition Away from DI2E, Standardize Your Development Environments with Atlassian. At this time, I'd like to introduce our speakers for today's webinar. Joining us online is Craig Strong, Chief Technology Officer for Aerial Partners, and Patrick Cross, Vice President of Octo Consulting. Craig is the co-founder and CTO of Aerial Partners, a small IT consulting company based in Times Square. He is currently teaching public classes in Agile and Atlassian tools and helping organizations transform themselves by connecting strategy with execution, handling dependencies, and improving quality. Patrick is a recognized expert in metadata, data architecture, DevOps, and Agile. He has more than 38 years experience developing, architecting, and designing systems, including 2 metadata repositories. He is currently supporting large federal agencies and adopting modern commercial best practices for software development. Patrick was one of the original members of the DI2E development tools team and has been supporting the effort for over 10 years. He brings a strong commercial perspective to the federal government. Craig and Patrick, thank you for taking the time to be here today, and the floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I will share my screen here. All right, is that showing up fine?
Looks great.
Excellent. All right, well, thanks very much. And my name's Craig Strong, and myself and Patrick will be talking about the transition away from DI2E. So just a quick agenda. So we'll talk a little bit about, well, we've already been introduced, so don't have to add too much to Nicole's excellent introduction there. But we'll talk a little bit about DI2E. Why is it important? Why did it exist? What are some of the original requirements, and how did it solve them? And what's happening now to it? And then some of the unique characteristics about DI2E, what made it so unique, even amongst many other competing solutions in the federal government and in the DoD space, especially, and intel community. Then we'll talk about some alternatives now that DI2E is sunsetting. And there's three different alternatives we'll talk about, sort of bronze, silver, and gold, if you will, depending on the needs. And then we'll go into a little bit more detail about each one. And in particular, Patrick will discuss the full DI2E replacement that their Octo is preparing, and what that entails in terms of onboarding and cost. Then we should have a few minutes for Q&A. All right, so myself, Nicole's excellent introduction there. I am based in New York City normally, Sydney, Australia sometimes, and our office are in Times Square. And we've worked with FBI, Social Security Administration, Air Force, and a number of commercial organizations, and as well as New York City municipal agencies. And I do spend a lot of time teaching, even public classes, as well as working with our customers. And Patrick?
Hello, thank you. Just for background, I spent the early part of my career, basically 18 years, working for commercial software companies, a very small company that eventually ended up getting bought. And I was part of Computer Left Right, actually, before the last company I was with got bought by Computer Associates. And then I transitioned into federal government, and more specifically into the intelligence community about 18 years ago. And around 10 years ago, started working on the DI2E development tools, or DI2E framework as it was known at the time. And I've got a lot of experience with Agile DevOps, AWS Cloud in particular. And then, from the early part of my career, lots of data management and metadata experience as well. And I'm currently based out of Chantilly, Virginia. And the business unit that I currently support, our primary customers are DIA and the NRO.
Excellent.
So a quick history, around 10 years ago, USDI, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence, created this thing called DI2E, the Defense Information Intelligence Enterprise, or Defense Intelligence Information Enterprise. It's one of the two. I always forget which I is first. But essentially the idea was that they wanted to start modernizing the way that the intelligence apparatus developed and fielded software and supported the warfighter. And they did that from a couple of reasons. One was to create this enterprise mindset. One of the challenges that you see in government in particular is that it gets very segregated and fragmented. And so they wanted to try and create some common governance, some common activities, and some common culture around developing software. And you can see some of the reasons that they wanted to try and do a lot of these things. And it was kind of a big change at the time to really start looking at that across the ISR, which is the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance community, because it spanned across the branches, the military branches, and the intelligence agencies. And so that community is a very broad, ginormous enterprise. And it really is a very complicated enterprise to deal with. And so there was a kind of a novel way to start thinking of it and try and drive some change, especially some cultural change, into that organization. So next slide. One of the things that was one of the initial features of that came out was this thing called the DI2E framework. And that was an intent to codify some of the governance, some of the tools, some of the behaviors, some of the processes, a lot of things around how to do software development, and more importantly, how to start adapting commercial best practices. So you think about 10 years ago, Agile, the cloud, a lot of these things were starting to become more prominent. And so there was a big push to start looking at how to do a lot of those things. So of the DI2E framework, one of the most successful component of that turned out to be the DI2E development tools effort, which at its peak had over 60,000 users and 6,000 unique projects. For some period of time during its life, it wasn't completely restricted to just ISR projects. I think it was around 3 years ago, USDI directed to sort of neck down to try and provide just support to the ISR. And so earlier this year, the number of users was in the 40,000 and around 4,500 projects. Some of the unique capabilities and facts around DI2E were it is an IL4 environment that provides support for storing CUI and ITAR information. It does provide instances that support US only Five Eyes and the SIPR secret network as well. As noted, USDI-INS, used to be USDI, now it's USDI-INS, was the sponsor. The executive agent for executing USDI's plans was NRO. That's who actually ran the contracts and stuff. And from an ATO perspective, the IC uses the RMF process. And so the DI2E tools got its authority to operate via the RMF process at the NRO. And you can see there's a huge number of users and communities that are leveraging the DI2E development tools as of today.
All right. Thank you, Patrick. And we'll note that perhaps one of the secrets of success there on the left, the zero cost, right? So that it was made available for users to sign up without having to pay for that. So, so let's talk about what is DI2E DevTools. What are the sort of components, logical components, and how do they fit together? Well, first of all, looking at DI2E as an environment, it's a web-based environment, cloud-based environment. So right from the get-go, it's set up as infrastructure as code. There's no manual steps there. Everything is scripted. Everything is, one script setting up the one ring to rule them all. And you can see down there in the bottom right that it uses Keycloak for single sign-on and to really secure the whole thing. So security is paramount, and that's one of the really unique things about DI2E is that among environments like this in the federal government, a lot of times they'll either sort of be so locked down, and I've personally seen this, where governments will struggle, public organizations will struggle making these kinds of environments available on the open internet, and sort of start off by having to really restrict them, and then you lose a lot of the benefits of scripting and doing things like that. So this environment is unique in that it's really secured, and yet it enables all of those advanced capabilities. So what are those capabilities? Well, it starts out with planning. And for planning, we use what makes available Jira software. But you also have Discourse. I think at one point there's Rocket Chat as well, and Confluence for recording. So planning is supported, and of course, coding. So there's 5 activities, and the second one is coding. And of course, we have Bitbucket, Atlassian Bitbucket for source code control, and that's Git-based, very similar to GitHub. Tools of that nature, GitLab. And for peer review, Fisheye and Crucible, some very, very sophisticated peer review tools, comparable to, or even I would say a step above GitHub, pull request review, that kind of thing. For build, of course, it's Jenkins-based, and also uses Nexus for containers for the artifact repository. So all of the jar files, all the different libraries that you're building, as well as the third-party dependencies are stored there, so they can be reviewed for vulnerability scanning, that kind of stuff. And of course, notifications, build failures, that kind of stuff, your standard thing that you need for CI/CD. And test is the next step. And of course, SonarQube provides the static code analysis, all the vulnerability scanning there, as well as Fortify. We'll get some nice reports out of that. And finally, it's very interesting that the users of DI2 are able to deploy their solutions. DI2E itself does not host any of these applications, but the users are able to host their applications wherever they need to. Might be on-premise, might be in the, rarely in the public cloud, but it could be in the secret cloud or even top secret. So there's a lot of different options there, and that's one of the really unique features there. In fact, there's multiple instances of DI2E to further facilitate that. So these are the 8. If you count them there, the 8 different tools that are sort of part of the standard DI2E DevTools stack. But in addition to that, there are some options and alternatives. So some of these do, of course, require additional license fees that would be added then to the cost. But Nessus vulnerability scanning, Splunk, of course, and Swift Kanban is a Kanban tool. And then, of course, there's an option, an alternative for building rather than Jenkins. One of the things we're looking into is Bitbucket pipelines, as we're seeing a shift away from sort of standard Jenkins builds to traditional Jenkins builds to more YAML sort of single file. And it's part of this push to configuration as code is making the build also just one piece of code. So that is the logical arrangement of the DI2E tools and how they work together. So you see, it's a really nice comprehensive support for DevOps, for CI/CD, but one of the hallmarks of DI2E DevTools is its flexibility. DI2E was not in a position because of the vast, very diverse nature of all of the agencies that it's supporting and the different missions, was not able to say, well, we're only going to support, microservices or a certain kind of architecture. So to illustrate that, let's take a look at some of the different build styles. So for example, in some cases, maybe, so for example, my company's done a bunch of work with Home Box Office, HBO, and there they have many things are standardized in Node.js as a sort of JavaScript-based architecture. And when you have a lot of things that are standard like that, you can use a common build where everything sort of has the same, one set of build scripts that's just parameterized for each project. So you get a lot of standardization there, and that's fine. That works for some agencies, but others may have to go one more level of complexity to sort of a templatized build, where you may have to support different technologies, maybe C#, Microsoft Stack, Python, Java. These are 3 different examples, but it could be many more. But you can see where, even though we're supporting multiple stacks, we still have some standardization here. We still have some common patterns, verbs in the CI/CD pipeline, and they're just sort of customized as they need to be to support these different technology stacks. And then finally, in some cases, we're supporting COTS products, commercial off-the-shelf products. A lot of customizations to that, maybe Salesforce-based platform, ServiceNow, or legacy software based on even things like Kix, COBOL. Aerial Partners is involved in a government agency project involving, I believe it was 6 million lines of Power Builder. So it's still out there, and we have to make this work, because the first do no harm, right? We've got to support. So the mantra here is support agencies right where they are today, meet them where they are today, and then help them move to the future. So that's really what DI2E does. So we did talk about alternatives, or I alluded to some alternatives. So let's talk about one. I think the elephant in the room is Platform One, and Platform One is a platform originating out of the Air Force, but now DoD wide, and it's a whole family of technologies, and it really represents a unification of a lot of software factories, Level Up, Kessel Run, Kobayashi Maru, things like that. And what it's supporting is a best practices based architectural style that's microservices based, using Kubernetes for deployment with zero trust. And this is really the way of the future. This is the way we need to go. There's no question about that. It supports, systems operating at very large scale, highly secure. And one of the interesting things about it is that it supports a continuous ATO. Authority to operate, authorization to operate is one of the most challenging things to obtain in the DoD and IC space. But the way Platform One can do this is that they have essentially kind of locked down the architecture, the CI/CD build process, and the deployment architecture, so that everything, they're using only approved hardened containers. The deployments are made to a managed production process. So every part of that is managed. And so essentially what's happening in the ATO is that they're approving the process, so that the process has guardrails, so there's no danger of making a change that could invalidate the ATO. And that's how they get this continuous ATO. So this is certainly future facing, and it's where we need to go. But that doesn't mean that we can necessarily be there today. So that's really where something like DI2E comes in. And you can see there quite a different philosophy. It's start where you are now. It's architecture agnostic. Sure, you can work in containers, absolutely. You can do Kubernetes, but you can also be VM based or even traditional. It's on-prem or cloud, and legacy sustainment. So there's a lot more flexibility there. It's sort of a good foundation, and really, if you look at it, it has a lower barrier to entry, surely, but it can be a pathway to Platform One. So could an agency start off in DI2E and then move to Platform One, or even use both in different cases? Absolutely. And they certainly do that today. One other thing I'd like to mention is that there are pieces of the sort of Cloud One environment that are really can be used by either one or really any project. So for example, the Iron Bank, that is a service that provides hardened images. And so for example, let's say you wanted, and we've used this at Ariel, a hardened approved version of Jira. Well, you go to your Iron Bank and you can get a Docker image that has that that version of Jira, or Jira service management, for example, Jira software. So Iron Bank can be used in either one. And same thing with Cloud One, because we mentioned that DI2E is really a CI/CD DevOps framework, and it does not provide hosting for applications. And that's where Cloud One comes in. So Cloud One, government agencies can use that to host their applications, regardless of whether they're built in DI2E or Platform One, or even neither of the two. So that's sort of how they work together, or how they fit together. And so DI2E, we talked about how great it is, but there is one catch. It is being decommissioned. So alas, the current instantiation of DI2E DevTools is terminating in about 6 weeks. So so as it stands today, there are no more, you cannot sign up for DI2E DevTools online. And even the existing users of DI2E DevTools will have to look for alternative solutions. So we have a solution for that, and I'd love to explain it to you now. So really, what we put together are 3 tiers, or 3 levels, depending on what's needed and where an organization is today. And so we you know, for ease of exposition, we talked about them in terms of bronze, silver, and gold. So if we start with bronze, really what we're talking about here is a very small, something that could be procured with a micro purchase. And we're talking about training classes and some Jira templates, things like that. So, you know, very small, targeted things that can help an organization that already has Atlassian to sort of get to the next level. And Ariel's done this with the Air Force, the Business and the Enterprise Systems Directorate over at the AFL-CMC, Lifecycle Management Center. And we had great success with that. It was really well received. And those are online or in person now. Thank God, we're back to in person. So that's with a very small, you know, micro purchase there. So if we need more than that, or we want more than that, there is a second alternative. And that's where we're calling that DevOps Accelerator, because it's either taking an existing DevOps or perhaps set of DevOps technologies in an agency and perhaps unifying them, making a baseline, or just taking them to the next level. Or for those agencies that are really adopting Agile, adopting DevOps principles and going through culture change, that this one is targeted there. So what it does not do, it's not a full DI2E replacement. It's not talking about SC2S or SIPRNet or anything like that. It's just an initial operating capability of DevOps. So, but with that, we have curated products and plugins. So not only Jira, but a couple of, you know, one of the really interesting and differentiators of Jira in terms of all other Agile project management tools out there is this incredible ecosystem of plugins. And some of them are real game changers. And so one of the things that Ariel's done is we've curated a small set of them that really make a huge difference. And this is what we include in our training as well. So these curated plugins, and of course, helping to go through the process of getting them approved, getting all that stuff done, configuring templates, integrating that system with other existing technologies in the agency, and then of course customizing training, both at the team level and as leadership, to really facilitate that. And we call it culture hacking, is sometimes called, to help infuse a culture of collaboration and faster communication and faster workflows, and really adopting that continuous improvement mindset, blameless postmortems, that kind of thing. And we're doing that through a partnership with 8A Stars 3 partner, so that can be obtained with a sole source without a competitive procurement. However, there is a need for more than that. So there is a full DI2E like environment, and that's where all of these, Octo and Ariel, work together. But especially, this is really Octo was, and Patrick in particular, built DI2E dev tools from the ground up and have been maintaining it for 10 years. So they have a wealth of knowledge of best practices. They know how to set up something like this and harden it and really make it work in terms of performance to support tens of thousands or more users. And so that's where you get your CAC integration. You can plug in your CAC card, high side support, auto provisioning. So you don't get a lot of help desk tickets. They basically get one login and they can just access all the different tools. Data spillage prevention, just tons of really neat and very, very important features there. As well as support for the full ATO lifecycle, which can take, we're talking, a massive effort of many months to up to a year, and we're really putting that together. So this is sort of a range of solutions that we put together to solve this urgent need of DI2E dev tools going away. So I'd like to take just a minute to talk a little bit more about Ariel and Octo. We've got a partnership here. So what does that mean? Why are there two companies here instead of just one? Well, Ariel is a small business. Octo is a medium-sized or large business. And really we provide very complementary capabilities. You see there's a lot of overlap there, but really Ariel, one of our areas of focus is in agile coaching. I'm an agile coach myself. Scrum, Kanban, scaling, flight levels, scaled agile framework, all that stuff, and really get into the training and coaching of DevOps and agile. And the training is really customized to provide, rather than just sort of theoretical agile training, it's in the context of Jira and all these different tools. So it's really hands-on and very much practical. Exactly, what does agile mean in this specific context? So we had a lot of great success with that. And you can see Octo has experience in, of course, DI2E, and really in that secret area, many things that Patrick can't even talk about, but lots of experience in risk management framework and all that stuff. So that's how the two companies collaborate together in a partnership. So let me move on to these three different offerings and talk a little bit about them. So first, the bronze, the Jira Jumpstart. Again, we're talking about a very quick, small, something you can put on a credit card, government credit card, P card, to purchase, let's say, 3 training classes would fit on that. And here are some of the classes, as sort of a representative set of classes that we offer that are perhaps the most relevant for this area: Jira Fundamentals, Power Users, Advanced Configurations, where you get into some of the, one of the, again, differentiators of Jira is extremely configurable. You can lock down parts of it. You can leave other parts of it wide open. It's a lot of configurability there. So we train that. and really make it accessible so that it's not just a small set of the initiated people in an agency that know Jira configurations, but it's really widely spread throughout the organization. And that is how you get agility. When you have that kind of knowledge spread out among the teams, you can really do something. And that's exactly what we did for the Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. So as well as some templates, one of the things that it does is remove the fields, that are nobody's using. So Jira out of the box, it has to have a lot of flexibility. It has to be able to support many different kinds of projects. But that means that out of the box, you're going to get these workflows and these forms that have lots of different fields, many of which you won't need on a given project. So rather than leave those hanging around, which basically, first of all, is annoying usability issue, and it could lead to data integrity issues, we fix all that and really get users just the minimum that they need to get their job done. And that really we've seen it make a huge difference. So even though this is small, it can certainly be sort of the tip of the spear and make a big difference there. So I'll move on to the second one, the DevOps Accelerator. And remember, we mentioned that this could either be really starting from scratch, an agency that really hasn't gotten into DevOps before, or not agency-wide. Or just helping an organization reach the next level of DevOps maturity. So there's a lot there, and some of the really interesting areas are things like DORA, the DevOps Research and Assessment standard. They've standardized on 4 key metrics, lead time and mean time to fix failures and things like that. That are really some of the things that we've got to keep an eye on, and they're sort of key indicators or KPIs for organizational maturity. But that's not all. It's one of the things that some forget, and I've seen even some coaches not emphasize enough, is the operations side. DevOps is not just dev, it's operations. So in operations, you have the golden signals, latency, traffic, errors, and saturation. Very, very important to measure those as well, so that what we're doing is we're getting the feedback and the information that's from operations and feeding that directly back into the development team. And that's where you really get organizational agility. So it's really completing that loop there and getting the operations environment and fully integrating that into development. And how do we do that? Through workshops, boot camps. Push-ups may or may not be required. We can't promise that. And as well as leadership training. What do leaders need to do? How does their behavior need to change? How do they walk the talk? How do they model the behavior that they're trying to see, the blameless postmortems and that kind of stuff? So there's some really important things there. Decision filters. When there's important decisions to be made, how do we think of them and how do we make those decisions that are consistent with our Agile and DevOps principles? Really, really important stuff. And here's some of the characteristics there. So that's the silver. It's quite open-ended, but I would like to, there's a lot of options there up to the, and the way we're positioning this is it's something that would be obtained sole source with the 8A Stars 3 program through our one of our partners. And there's a lot of a room there to do something small or something fairly major. But I would like to just give one quick example of one of the types of configurations we're talking about here. And this is a Jira board, but you can see that if you've ever used Jira or a tool like Jira version 1, Rational Team Concert, Azure DevOps, this looks pretty unique, just looking at it. You can see that there's colors immediately giving us information. So it's an information radiator. We can see the difference between the user stories, the new features to be added, compared to defects. And we can also see that something needs our attention right away. We can see there's a flag here, and one of these things has been blocked. But we can further see, if we really look at this ticket here, we can see the other elements that the dependencies that are preventing this one from moving forward. And if we look even closer, we can see that they're crossed out, which means that those dependencies have now been finished. So this should no longer be blocked. We can unblock it. We can move forward. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you can see here from these filters, there's a lot of rich information we can get from here. We can see who is the busiest person, right? They could be a bottleneck. What are the cars that are the oldest, right? If we want to maintain a flow, we want to maintain flow going forward, whether we're using Scrum or Kanban or what Agile method we're using, it's all about maintaining the flow of value from end to end. And so we want to see which of these tickets are the oldest, they've been hanging around. We probably need to, rather than taking a new ticket, we need to focus on those and make sure they get done. So just a lot of stuff here. What's been added after the sprint start, that's a no-no, or things that we've carried over from the previous sprint. So there's a lot of benefit we can get just by making this. This is our daily huddle board. This is our stand-up board. And just by making it very rich, information rich, we can avoid these sort of stand-ups where some of you may have been involved in, where it's sort of like you're sitting there waiting for it to end. With a configuration like this, that will be a thing of the past. So just one quick example of the kinds of things that could be really in this silver, or of course the gold option and alternative that we're providing. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Patrick to talk about the gold offering.
So for those folks who are actually interested in really recreating something akin to the DI2E dev tools for their agency's use, we certainly can support working on that. We do have a couple of paths where we're starting down this road with the Navy, helping them on some stuff and trying to recreate some of the things that they need for theirs. We're also helping some other deployments where they've already got an existing deployment and trying to help them. Right now, we're more swamped with trying to help people get over the import-export hurdle, and then eventually start to try and add in some of the features that we've added to DI2E over the last 10 years to help improve and automate the environments as well. So again, today, the DI2E environment is, DevTools environment is IL4. We know that there's about 17 controls delta between the 4 and the 5, and some questions around authentication methodologies in terms of what two-factor could be allowed and what other sorts of accesses could be allowed that could still support the needs for some of the automated builds and the CI/CD processes. But that's certainly a doable activity as well. IL2 is also feasible, where we could provide things that if you don't need access to or store CUI or ITAR information, that would also be a feasible path. And if you look to the highlight box, one of the things, again, over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of stuff that's been added to the DI2E development tools. A lot of it has been focused around automation. We have always been a very budget constrained team in terms of what we were trying to provide. And so we couldn't afford to have processes that were very help desk intensive. And so you can imagine when you're provisioning upwards of 70 projects, a week, you can't really deal with a lot of work. And so we put in a tremendous amount of automation around automatically creating projects and configuring them for access. Likewise, user permissions was a huge deal. So we automated that entire process so that the project administrators could set up people in their organizations that could, via automated workflows, either approve people for access or go in and grant people access themselves. And so that took the help desk out of the equation. And so it was also not only more responsive to the customers, but also significantly less costly to the government to provide the capability. as time went on, another area that became a big deal, if you look at the cost for DI2E, almost a third of it or so, 30 to 40% is labor. The other two big buckets are the infrastructure costs and the licensing costs for the tools. And so when you look at the Atlassian suite, plus all the plugins, plus all the other tools that are there, the licensing costs also do become a significant cost as well. And as you can imagine, with 60,000 users, you've got a number of users that are becoming inactive. And so starting to manage that proactively as well became very important. And so the DPAM was something we created to help manage with a lot of that license self-service, where after a period of time, people not using the tool, we would deactivate their licenses. And then there was easy way for them, if they came back in, to come back in then and reactivate their licenses so they could get back access to the tools that they wanted to use. So there's a ton of stuff around that we've added over the years. And it's been, fully ATO. That's a somewhat unique feature for the CUI and ITAR-based capability, which has been originally was a huge struggle for us to get over that hurdle. And now that we're there, it's been one of the more unique features that we've had. Next slide. So what we've done, and this is the sort of just a very big high level picture of an architecture that we've put together for what the DI2E next architecture would look like. And we're actually building this out as part of a research and development effort today. And so essentially, this is taking all the things we've learned over the last 10 years of DI2E and incorporating all the modern AWS best practices from a security and deployment perspective. So you can see we're using multiple accounts for the different areas. The three boxes sort of around the left side and top edge are sort of the management area. And despite the fact that we do use a lot of infrastructure as code, we're still not as good as we should be. There's still a few pets. If you're familiar with the pets versus cattle metaphor, there's still a number of pets that exist in those outer areas as we lay down that outer part of that infrastructure. And then the inside part of that, really, which is the managed applications part, is the production staging and development environments where all the applications specifically would be hosted in there as well. And those would leverage a number of the AWS capabilities to provide, the scalability, the performance, the reliability, all of that stuff that's there automatically. And then the applications themselves would be deployed in clusters, again, for performance and availability. And this is also optimized to minimize the AWS costs as much as possible as well. That was one of the things that we've learned over the last 10 years is how to try and minimize that and ensure that we're leveraging the scalability and reliability to the extent necessary based on cost and not gold plating everything as well. And so this is the sort of what a new environment would look like if we were to deploy that for someone. Next slide. So the onboarding times to create something like this, typically to lay down sort of that outer layer and get the outer infrastructure in place is typically around 6 to 8 weeks. And then after that, the application provisioning can start. And it takes around 2 to 4 weeks to automate the provisioning for a new application. Obviously, a lot of that can be done in parallel as well. And then the long pole, really, for a new environment is getting that ATO. Depending on the organization, it can be 6 months, it can be 12 months. We obviously have all of the documentation documenting all the controls, how they're met. All that stuff is already available from the existing installation, but there's still a huge process to go through with security teams. I think, as we all know, reciprocity isn't, I don't know, it exists with the unicorns and the rainbows somewhere in a different fairy tale land, but it certainly isn't in the DoD and the IC. But if you've got an existing ATO, obviously, and the tools can sort of fit into there, or if you've got potentially existing tools that you would like to sort of upgrade the installation, sometimes it's easier than to make some basic security relevant changes and go through an ATO upgrade versus trying to go through the whole process all over again. Also to mention some of the acquisition processes can also be very time consuming as well. Obviously, there's some ways to short circuit from that, whether it be subcontracting relationships with existing vendors or looking for other J&A to do sole source or some other things. But that also is an impediment to getting started on some of these activities as well. Next slide. So from a cost structure perspective, the way that we typically manage things is we don't really have a fee to instantiate the environment. That really just comes as part of the annual operating cost. Again, as we mentioned, the software licenses and the AWS cloud costs represent somewhere in the 50 to 60% range of the cost above the maintenance for people and the help desk costs as well. And the primary driver behind all that really is the number of users. How many users are you trying to support? And so as you get up to scale, the numbers can get fairly good, where the cost per user can be in the hundreds of dollars. But when you're in the lower numbers, when you're trying to deploy something that is secure, scalable, and reliable, it's the per user cost can be significant because you don't get those economies of scale at the higher level. Next slide.
All right. And with that, we'd like to thank you very much. I think we have some time for questions. And you could see these QR codes will take you to our, I think, different landing areas in our websites talking about the DI2E alternatives and trainings and various offerings that we have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig and Patrick, for the great information and session. If you would like to submit a question or have feedback from today's session, we encourage you to navigate to the question and answers pod located on the bottom panel of your screen. So we have had a few questions come in the chat pod. So one of the questions is, where is the DI2E-like environment hosted?
Yeah, I've been trying to type these in there. So essentially, for a DI2E-like environment, if somebody wanted to essentially replicate, that would be very much dependent upon what that customer had available. In discussions with some of the people who are struggling with the migration away from the current environment, some places don't have access to GovCloud, or they don't believe that they can get an ATO in a GovCloud instantiation. And so they're trying to push toward an on-prem installation. So it really does depend on what the customer's needs are. One of the things that we have from our background is, again, with that ISR community. And so one of the critical needs for customers in that community in using a development tools environment is that it be an ATO'd environment. So when we looked at doing something akin to creating a DI2E-like environment that would be something like FedRAMP certified, one of the challenges was that none of our current customers could migrate to that because they needed the ATO to satisfy their security team's needs, that it really is safe for their CUI information. And so that was one of the challenges. And so when we look at sort of what's next, it really is very customer dependent right now. And that's based upon our experience primarily with that ISR community. I'm sure that there's a number of customers that are outside that in the federal space that would have different needs and would be more accommodating to FedRAMP and others, but we just don't have the experience dealing with those customers for, again, from a DI2E perspective. So hopefully that helps. Again, a lot of that is driven by the security folks. I can, over a beer sometime, I can have some interesting conversations about some of the security questions we've been asked. Let's see. So for the DI2E-like environments, to be cloud or data center. So all of the DI2E currently uses data center. Atlassian is really shifting people towards their cloud provided applications, not COI capable. So that's been one of the challenges for most of our current customers, is that they need something that does continue to support the CUI information. And Atlassian now, the only thing you can install on-prem is Data Center, and we've been with Data Center for a long time. A lot of that was due to scalability and reliability issues, but that's, I think, also part of the reason driving the higher cost at the lower user levels as well, because of the Data Center licensing costs.
Yeah, interesting. So Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that really interested me about the DI2E DevTools configuration was just the attention to detail in terms of configurations. Because I saw there is a question about Jira configurations. Well, just all of the little things that need to be done to guard against data spillage, for example. And, even because you're getting all these notifications, and we don't want to just shut them off, right? Because that would be, part of the agility is to make sure that the right information gets to the right people at the right time, and we don't restrict collaboration. So we want to make sure that the build notifications and, notifications about Jira tickets and things like that get to the people they need to get to. But at the same time, so I thought, restricting those to only have a link so that you have to actually go back to the secure environment to see the details, to guard against any possibility of data spillage. I thought that was something really interesting and unique about the DI2E DevTools.
Yeah,
really
one of the things we
spreading the
discovered
needle.
a long time ago as part of the CUI, that when the parts of the tickets went out, that and so we had to customize some of the templates in the guts of Jira and Confluence to make sure that that stuff didn't go out. One of the other questions was asking about applications accredited to IL5. So interestingly enough, based upon the architecture that we've used from a DI2E perspective, with leveraging a lot of the AWS security features and Keycloak as the authentication boundary for the applications, the IL5 accreditation depends much more on those capabilities, sort of the crunchy outer edge of the environment, and less on the applications themselves, as long as they can support, the authentication being done, sort of in that manner. And so when you look at things that DI2E has done around, we still support two-factor authentication via email and phone call and some of these other things. A lot of that is a negotiation where some of the changes to get to that IL5 level would have to occur in working with security folks. And again, I think Craig mentioned earlier, one of the challenges is figuring out how to make the environment available. And so if you're trying to do automated builds, a lot of that requires access that is challenging in a pure two-factor environment. So if you say, okay, everything has to be CAC enabled and the only way to get to anything is with a CAC. Okay, well, Jenkins can't plug in a CAC and type in a pin when it's doing an automated build. So how do you solve that problem? And so it's been that balance between secure and available has been one of the biggest challenges that we've faced over time. And if you look in the commercial world, that is a constant struggle that they deal with all the time. That, if your application isn't truly available to meet the needs of the customers, then typically you fail, right? You're not going to get your revenue, your money, or your success. And we tend to not have those same motivations, especially again in the community that DI2E has been a part of for a long time. That has made a lot of this a very big challenge that we really have tried to highlight and work from the perspective of risk management, as opposed to incident avoidance, because you can't avoid all incidents. And if you do, you essentially create an unavailable system, which doesn't meet the needs of the users. Sorry for going on a little bit of a tangent there.
Yeah, no worries. Got a lot of questions coming in. I'll see if I can quickly address one. I was talking about the out-of-the-box fields, removing out-of-the-box fields for Jira, and sort of customizing Confluence and things like that, I think would be related. So that's a question near and dear to my heart. Spent, me and our team has spent many, many hours and a lot of time working on those kinds of things for different customers. And it's it's not so much removing a ton of fields as it is removing a few, renaming some, and actually even adding some additional fields. Because in certain cases, for example, you may have with a defect, you might want to add additional fields to specifically talk about the environment or the steps to reproduce, that kind of thing. And also, one of my favorites is for Kanban teams, making sure they have class of service, that kind of stuff, that they can specify whether this is due at a fixed date or it's an expedite or that kind of thing. And a lot of, just out of the box, of course, Jira has to, it's a very, very general tool. It has to work for any number of situations. So you really want to customize that. So, for example, things like priority. Well, what does priority even mean in an agile situation? I mean, aren't we just stacking, if we're in Scrum, aren't we just stack ranking our backlog? What does priority even mean? So there could be urgency. There could be things like impact, potential impact, risk. So it's really sort of unpacking all of that and getting back to some of the fundamental measurements and metrics rather than these sort of vague notions of priority, which, that's where what we found is by having sometimes even a few additional fields, but making sure they're absolutely well understood and well defined can really cut down, increase usability, cut down on confusion. One of the other things we do is make sure that fields appear when they're needed. So with your workflows, you can actually customize the forms so that you don't necessarily see every field all the time. For example, does it make sense to assign a ticket to somebody if it's in the backlog? Well, we don't push, right? Agile teams pull work. So they're volunteering, they're signing up for things. You don't have a bunch of people on a line and then everyone steps back except for one person. We don't do that. It's people will volunteer and take work. So you may not want to even see that field, or certainly not make it mandatory until you're at a certain place in the workflow. Another thing really quick is really customizing workflows to have the best balance between steps that are mandatory. For example, let's say there's an approval and we need to make sure that approval is captured in the audit trail. We need to know who approved something, when they approved it. That could be very important for governance, for oversight. That might be mandatory, but at the same time, so that's fine. We support that. But at the same time, all the other steps of the workflow, you don't want to force somebody who, just fat finger made a little mistake to have to take something all the way through the workflow and back just to get, just to correct a mistake. So getting that combination of flexibility where wherever you can, as well as the governance and the oversight capabilities where you need them. And that's getting back to what Patrick is talking about, is that threading the needle between, the balancing act between capability and, sort of collaboration, as well as, locking things down where they need to with security. And that is a hard problem. That will never be an easy problem. That will always be hard. But with DI2E and with what Octo has done and what Ariel's done in other contexts, you have our organizations have been working on that problem for many, many years. So we have a lot of best practices to bring to bear.
Okay, there's a couple other questions I'll answer. One of the questions that was asked is, what are we offering that's different or better, say, than Navy Lift? Many of the DI2E customers are moving over to Navy Lift. What we're offering is something different in the sense that it's a custom installation. So from a cost perspective, obviously, it's not a per user. We don't have an environment set up that's ATO'd and ready to go. That, what we're offering is the ability to work with a customer to stand up an environment for them, for whatever their scope of customer base is, to provide something. So from a timeline perspective, that's a negative, in that it does take time to make that happen, whereas Navy Lift is available today. I can say that full disclosure, we are working to provide some folks from the current DI2 team over to Navy Lift to help them with the transition and get some of the users migrated over, and to help them upgrade, change, configure their current tools to provide some of the critical capabilities that DI2E has today that are lacking today in Navy Lift. And so from a pricing list, we do have some estimated pricing that is based upon our experience for different user levels. And so if you follow up with me afterwards, I can certainly work and provide some of those ballpark estimates to you that do include, licensing, AWS, and labor, at some different user levels. And would be happy to chat with you about that. And yeah, let's see, other questions. Confluence, will Confluence be available soon? Yes, but it is unlikely it will ever be anything other than read-only, because August 1st, all of DI2E is going read-only. I believe that Confluence will be available within the next 2 weeks. If you have, the idea behind making it available, at least read-only, is so the users can finish their exports and get their data out. So if the help desk is the current best place to get that information. We have daily calls to talk about when it's going to go up and who's going to be available to. And so there's still a few things going on from a security perspective that they're interested in doing. And so, but it will definitely be available at some point for users to export. Worst case, if something changes between now and August 1st, you will be able to put in help desk tickets, and the help desk will be able to export your data and get it to you. Yes, Carla, I am incredibly sympathetic. We are struggling to make sure that we're staying on top of things and providing access. Right now, for some of the stuff, we don't even have access, so we can't really support getting to the data today.
Yeah, there was a question about the silver option and DevOps Accelerator, and sort of what IL level would that be targeting. And that's not that easy of a question to answer, right? Because it's basically it's short of a full DI2E like environment, but it's really where is the organization today? So maybe it's going into an existing environment, could be even on-prem, and let's say helping them to get cloud enabled or cloud ready. We did that for a New York City municipal agency where there was some really, really big COTS products that for case management, things that they were depending on, that were pets. They were built on a set of servers, like server farm, that had been incrementally tended to and fixed and patched and everything over 10 years. And in fact, no one at the organization remembered how to set everything up. The knowledge just literally wasn't there. So getting in there and teasing that apart and then turn that all into infrastructure as code, we were able to convert all of that into some Terraform scripts and basically take it from months of work to just a couple minutes. So that's that's one thing. That's public internet, public AWS. Actually, it was not. It's that was an AWS instance that was provided by a New York City municipal agency called the Department of IT. So it varies. What, Patrick, interesting your perspective on that. What are the different options that could be provided short of a full DI2E like environment?
Yeah, I mean, again, some of that would be around trying to, if for example, if you were at an IL2 level and you needed help getting to IL4, certainly we could discuss what that would be. Some of that might be literally just providing some of the authentication around Keycloak, and leveraging some of the AWS capabilities around the firewalls and the subnetting and things that we've done for DI2E. So essentially you could leverage an existing installation and add the capabilities on top of that that you might need to get to that. Because a lot of that's again been built. It's just a matter of configuring and deploying it to protect the environment, as opposed to really making a wholesale change to create a whole new environment.
Yep.
So one of the other questions was, how are user accounts shared across multiple projects? From the current DI2E perspective, everything is in the single instance. So it's really a shared service model. In one of the reasons that we moved to the stronger infrastructure as code and the architecture, high-level architecture that I showed in the picture, is to provide more options more easily to segregate those environments. So if you noticed in there, in that inside part, there's prod, staging, and dev. Theoretically, you could have multiple prod environments, and with the infrastructure automation, it becomes then much easier to manage that environment where you have multiple production instances if there was a need to segregate different sets of users or different projects into their own specific production environment. In today's DI2E, the way we've grown up, that was really, we really never got to the point where we could do that effectively and easily. But you could certainly do that. Now, it does come with cost, because you're going to be having multiple production environments. So there is additional infrastructure cost that has to be there, and there is a little bit of additional support costs that would come with that as well. Hopefully that answers the question.
It was a question about MCBOSS, the Marine Corps.
I do not. Is that, I guess a question would be, is that an AWS-based environment, or is it a custom on-prem environment? Or is it both?
It's just typed into the chat. So
yeah, we know, and I can say, we have run across a number of other people that we've been working with to try and help them that have a combination of on-prem and AWS available within their environments. It really does depend. Again, everything that we have built today has a fairly strong dependency on AWS, leveraging a lot of their services and capabilities. So that's the easiest thing and the fastest thing for us to leverage. However, one of the reasons that we are moving to that new architecture is to reduce the cost to also provide support for things like Azure or on-prem or Google Cloud as well. And so we're leveraging some newer tools and capabilities from an infrastructure as code perspective that are more agnostic across there. But if you think of things like the relational database service and some of those things, the amount of energy it takes to stand up a Postgres database that is as reliable, backed up, and available as what RDS provides is completely not insignificant, and it requires a very unique skill set to do that. And so we're happy to not have to hire that Postgres guru and genius and pay for all of the hardware and multiple locations and everything else that you need to pay for what you could just get out of this, really out of the box from Amazon.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Craig and Patrick. So I think we just have a few more questions. One of them is, what are the biggest issues in establishing a DI2E DevTools capability?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
What are the biggest issues in establishing a DI2E like DevTools capability?
Yeah, so the two biggest ones, honestly, are the acquisition path. Well, all right, so there's funding, so there's that problem. And then there's the acquisition path, figuring out how to hire someone. If your desire is to hire, Octo and Ariel to help with some of that. It's figuring out that acquisition path to get that done. And then the ATO, really, those are the biggest challenges. The technology itself is honestly the easy part. And ideally, it'd be great if we could start creating sort of an enterprise ecosystem where we could start sharing a lot of this stuff. So, IronMake has the Jira container. It would be great if we were all collaborating on making sure that container is as hardened and as well configured and everything else as it can be for everybody that's going to leverage that. And that we can share some of the code that we're doing for a lot of the things, all the stuff that we're planning on doing and that we are doing currently around that AWS architecture that we're building out is all going into GitHub so that it can be shared. And so, once you sort of create that outer infrastructure, if you've got numerous customers or numerous instantiations that are leveraging sort of that same framework, then if somebody comes along and says, hey, I really want to do GitLab, or hey, I want to do whatever the next testing tool or something else that they want to deploy into that environment, well, they can automate the installation of that within the context of that already deployed framework, and then it becomes available to anybody else leveraging that framework. And so, that's kind of one of the things that DI2E framework has been espousing from its inception, is the need for more collaboration across agency, across project, across contractor, and it's just hard to do. And so that's one of the things we're hoping to be able to do, and working with folks like Platform One and others that have already done some work as well to try and make that more of a reality for this specific problem set.
Absolutely. And, to that, speaking to that, we at Ariel worked with the Social Security Administration, and one of the challenges over there, and many, IRS, many other agencies have a lot of, legacy, a lot of legacy projects that are, in various stages of legacy modernization. And what's one of the biggest challenges we've seen is in being able to adopt DevOps and Agile principles and practices. And we talk about culture change, but where you've got this, a mission critical application that's running, and in the case of Social Security Administration or other agencies like that, providing, life-saving, literally, benefits, and you first do no harm. We cannot, do anything that would, you've already got overstretched, probably, users and case management professionals using those systems. So, and they've gotten used to the systems the way they are. So how do you, deploy these new systems in a way that that doesn't distract or impede the mission? And certainly even more so in DoD applications or IC applications. But so what's needed is some sort of an integration capability so that we can use a strangler fig pattern and sort of incrementally replace, like a patchwork quilt, incrementally upgrade the existing system, the legacy system over time. And that capability, that's beyond something that a typical DevOps or CI/CD platform would provide, but it's something that's another layer on top of that. And so when we're talking about capabilities that need to be shared, and that, asking just one project to bear the burden for creating some sort of an integration framework that, let's say, it can integrate between Java and the Kix COBOL environment, that's not easy. And that's something that it really should be developed at an organization-wide level. So there's a great need for, the DevOps platform and multiple other steps beyond that. So we need to get, the DevOps stuff, the basic CI/CD stuff solid, so that we can move on and solve the really big problems that, above that, and of which that's one near and dear to my heart. And that's that's exciting stuff. So I think there's a lot further that we can go if we start building this kind of an ecosystem.
Awesome, thank you. And then I think we have time for one more question. So could you deploy a different cloud provider or on-premise equipment instead of AWS GovCloud?
Yeah, so we could do that. Again, the timeframes become bigger because we've got to then refactor a lot of the capabilities that we already understand very deeply how to use on the Amazon platform. So on-prem would probably be the most difficult. There, again, as I noted, things like relational database and some other things that we would need to provide, we absolutely would need to find the right experience to stand up those highly available, highly reliable services within an on-prem environment. It's possible that those would already exist in that customer space if they're using it heavily already. But on-prem would probably be the most difficult. Transitioning to an Azure or a Google Cloud would be probably a little bit easier, but that's certainly, it's feasible, but again, the timelines just get longer.
Yeah. And, I would mention that, one of the things we sort of take for granted, Patrick, but, one of the things that just some of the attention to detail that went into just the initial planning of DI2E dev tools is that a lot of the tools themselves, if you look at a lot of tools in the market today, a lot of them are cloud only, they're SaaS only. So, full stop, no FedRAMP, no nothing. So, there's just no way we could use those in most DoD or IC environments. So the fact that Jira provides, the data center version at all, and these other open source projects that we can install on-prem as needed, that's really key right there. So just even in selecting and curating those products to put together into the CI/CD pipeline to begin with is really important. Same thing with the Kanban tool, Swift Kanban. That's the only Kanban tool that I know that's a true enterprise Kanban tool that can do, portfolio Kanban and that kind of thing that can be installed on premise. And you need to be able to do that if you're going to support these kinds of environments. So there's a lot of care and thought that has gone into just putting this stuff together.